if you look at the Genesis lifespans, and you can excuse me, you can actually plot them all out. There is enough information there. And we can go all the way from Adam, and this is just a graph of all of the total lifespan of each person who's named there, starting from Adam. And there is enough data if you look through Genesis and then into Exodus. You have enough data to go from Adam to Moses, and the last plot on that graph is actually Psalm 90, which was written by Moses. And if you look at the scale there, Psalm 90 refers to the lifespan of people as being 70 to 80 years. But if we go back to Adam and his immediate descendants, we've got 10 times that or even more. It sort of bumps along there at over 900. The longest one, as John mentioned before, was 969, Methuselah. And then a couple of generations after, it seems to just sort of fall over a cliff, doesn't it? Something has happened there. So there's certainly been significant change in the lifespans, and there's certainly something significantly different in the time that Adam and his immediate descendants lived compared with the time that we live. And that is what we see in those things in the fossil record that we've mentioned so far this morning. So what happened when it looks like things fell over a cliff there, which is in between the time of Noah and Shem? Well, of course, that is the time of Noah's flood. Noah spent a little bit more than half his life before the flood and then lived for a few centuries afterwards. And Shem was born before the flood, but he didn't live nearly as long after the flood. So there's a significant change there. So something must have happened to the whole world to make enough difference to the human lifespans. Now, I have had this question thrown at me, and I know that John has as well. Oh, well, maybe those large numbers don't mean years. Maybe they mean months. Actually, there's a really interesting way to answer that, because we are given the ages of each person or each person named there, how old they were when their sons were born, when the next son in the sequence was born. Now, if you look at all of those, starting Adam, 130, and remember that wasn't his first son. That's actually Seth when he was born. And each of these named persons in the next generation is the one who was the line of the genealogy, which eventually leads to Christ, of course. But that wasn't necessarily the first born child of that family. But even if it was, it doesn't make any sense if these only mean months, because if you look further down a little bit in the list there, you've got 70 years, 65 years. Now, if you divide that by 12, you get a rather silly answer for when that man could father a child. So we'll dismiss that quite simply. And this is a good indication of, if you actually know what the scriptures say, you can answer a lot of the skeptics' challenges, because a lot of the skeptics don't know what scripture says. And of course, the other thing is just don't be afraid to check out the science. So let's go back to these lifespans. Now, there is one anomaly in the pre-flood lifespans here, and that's Enoch, who seemed to live a significantly shorter lifespan. And again, that is also explained in the scriptures. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Whereas all of the other people described there, it says they died. And then later on, we're told in the book of Hebrews that Enoch walked with God by faith, right? And God took him and he didn't die. So he is an anomaly there, but that's not to do with the total lifespan of the people who lived in that pre-flood time. So the real change there is something changed in the whole world before the flood and after the flood. Something really significant happened that resulted in a shorter lifespan. Now, there are all sorts of things that result in shorter lifespans, And we can talk about some of those, but if you think about, the world degenerated very much there. The whole environment degenerated, the climate degenerated. In fact, Noah was warned about that. Even though there will be regular cycles of day and night, and harvest and seed time, there will be periods of heat and cold. And uh, John, you've described some of the the serious cold that you get in some places, and we know that that does have an impact on people's lifespans if they are constantly stressed by severe cold and they have no way of keeping themselves warm artificially. Um, our diet changed by permission from God. We were allowed to eat meat. Well, why was that? Well, obviously there would be places that God knew uh, where you couldn't eat a vegetarian diet all the year round, because it just wasn't available. So the climate, the environment went severely downhill, and as a result, the lifespans went downhill. So they are an indicator that something has seriously changed in the world after Noah's flood. And some of those things that we see in the fossil record, where there are big animals like the mosasaur that Joseph has just shown us, that no longer exist. So there has been a lot of change in the world since it began, but it's not to do with millions of years of endless cycles and slow gradual processes. It's often catastrophic processes, Noah's flood being the main one of those, but other catastrophic processes. And in general, the history of the world, as we have said, is from very good, when everything was finished by God. It's gone from good to bad to worse to where we are now in the UK and Australia and beyond.